To start off with, you might ask why I show you a picture of a baker kneading dough in a bakery, and what that has to do with innovation, what I'm here to talk about. Well, I actually have three hopefully good reasons for this. Number one is I want to give you an example of how collaboration with science can actually lead to innovations in how we bake bread. Number two is, after all these years of researching on innovation, we find that innovation has nothing to do with that light bulb that flashes up, and has more to do with actually hard work, like we see in some of these baking trades. And number three, of course I did have a flashing light bulb on my slide until someone told me that 95% of all innovation presentations start with the light bulbs. So I thought I'd start with this. So I hail from QUT just across the river, and you may know that QUT has quite a famous slogan. It calls itself the University for the Real World. And that's not just a branding thing. It's actually a vision and a mantra, if you want, for how we conduct teaching, research, and engagement. We have a shiny new building, and in this shiny new building we do some very cool and advanced science and engineering research with organizations primarily in Queensland. So what I show you here is a couple of self-driven lawnmowers, if you want. That's a part of our world-leading robotics center that works with Queensland farmers to see how we can actually optimize some of the production in our own state here. What we also have in there is a world-famous interactive display where we can actually engage. And the whole building is open to the public, so you're more than welcome to actually come in, join, and engage with the university, with science, and see how innovation can be done there. So I hail there. That means my own research over more than 10 years now has been with organization. That means always it starts with an organization problem, and it actually goes back to it, hopefully with a solution, obviously, in the end. And that's not only my mantra. That's a mantra that actually has been lauded as the sexiest job of the 21st century. Scientists in organizations being the new sought-after resource that people want. Organizations like Woolworths spend quite a bit of money into working with science. And I want to give you some reasons. Actually, I want to give you 3 reasons today for why they do this. So, 3 reasons to collaborate with scientific organizations, with universities, to actually help innovate. Number 1, to move yourself from innovation that is not confidence or status-based, but evidence-based. Number 2, because you can compare apples with oranges, independent of what people tell you. And number 3, to help you become conscious of your competencies, but also likewise conscious of your incompetencies. So let me give you and talk you through these examples. Evidence-based. Evidence-based thinking means that the big elephant in the room is not the person with the highest status, is not the expert on the stage that you're listening to, but rather the elephant in the room that makes a decision is the evidence and the facts that you can provide to support that decision. That is incredibly relevant for innovation endeavors. Innovation is uncertain. Innovation is about the future. Innovation is, in short, something we don't know about. Right? So how can we do this better? By bringing evidence into the table, which is something that scientists do, and scientists train for years to be able to actually produce that evidence and to analyze this evidence and to transform this evidence into good decisions. So, a good example that you may have read, or if you're one of my students, you would have seen the movie with Brad Pitt in it, is Moneyball, which is the real story of how a person that was working for a very small team in Auckland in the United States transformed the way we think about sports and sports management by using evidence-based metrics and basically kicking out all the managers and scouts and all the experts around the table and showed them how evidence-based decisions can lead you to better performance. And the story goes that the Boston Red Sox have basically hired him away, adopted the model, and then became successful. That's evidence-based thinking. What does that have to do with innovation? Let me give you 2 examples, one of which, unfortunately, is not my own. UPS is a great example for evidence-based innovation. What have they done? UPS, as you know, is a logistics company. They work around with lots and lots of trucks with GPS sensors, so they grab a lot of data around where these people drive every day. Now, they found out 2 things. Number 1, turning left costs a lot of time. Number 2, turning left causes a lot of accidents because you have to cross the lane. So what they've done, they reprogrammed their GPS software to only allow right turns, or in our equivalent here in Australia, to only allow left turns. What did they do? So all the drivers can only turn left on their route, which means that if your destination on the right, you wouldn't be the one going to this, you would actually have to go around the block. Overall, that saves millions of miles, millions of gallons of gas, millions of carbon footprint emissions and so forth. So it's a really good innovation, completely grounded in evidence. And the idea behind it is Deceptively simple. What would happen if the whole Australia would only turn left? What would happen to Woolworths if all their trucks would only turn left? It would be to the better. Give you a second, probably more local example of work that we've been doing with Suncorp here in Queensland around the way that they actually handle their claims. As you know, in October, storm season comes about and claims rush up into the, tens of thousands a day. So it's a very big business. And we had a look at how long it actually takes to actually handle some of these claims and what could be done about this. So again, not based on status, not based on some new ideas, just based on sheer evidence about how we handle these claims today. And some of the things that we found allowed us to actually drastically assess this from 60 days claims handling to 3 days claims handling, which is obviously a great innovation, great improvement to the productivity of claims handling, to the point that some people don't even believe that the claims have been handled appropriately because it goes so fast. So that's evidence-based innovation. Number 2 is a thing that scientists can do much better than organizations, because we all have been trained to not to compare apple with oranges, right? Because they're different fruit. Well, of course you can, if you actually abstract it in a particular way. And that sort of principle of comparing apples with oranges, again, sadly, is not my own invention. It's an invention that became famous with the books of Freakonomics and so forth, where people decisively and deliberately compare two things that seemed unrelated. Yeah? So we don't look at other teams, we look at other sports, we look at other ball games when we make decisions about our own company. Let me give you an example of something that we've done. When you talk to retail organizations such as Woolies, or you can take Coles, IGA, whatever it is, or even Qantas, Maya One, and so forth. When they think about loyalty, they think about points, rewards, frequent shopper cards. You may think about a red carpet when you sign into Qantas lounges, and so forth. However, loyalty is also something we find somewhere else. A drug addict is incredibly loyal. Maybe not to something that we would like to foster, but there is loyalty there, unfortunately, to a drug. Marriage is a form of loyalty. Australian pride is a form of loyalty. Gambling is a form of increased loyalty to people. Yeah, and you see this everywhere. You see this in gaming and investment, in the way that we deal with our banks. None of these things have anything to do with status points, rewards, Maya One cards, and so forth, but they're all forms of loyalty. If you think about loyalty this way, you find out that they're very, very different drivers. Not all of which are desirable, mind you, so we don't want to create loyalty to Woolworths by making them addicted. But there are certain things, right? So marriage could be shared investment, share obligation. That's why we hopefully stay with our partners for the rest of our lives. And so forth. So this way, completely transform the way that we think about loyalty, and especially how we can actually create these reward programs and make our people more customer loyal to our own company. And very little of them has to do with how many points you get for your shopping cart and whether or not you get a better parking lot when you come to a company. The third reason that I want to talk about is about consciousness. Consciousness, we mean about consciousness about things that you're good at, and consciousness about the things that you're not good at. Conscious incompetence, conscious competence. And there's two ways that dealing with universities helps you with this. The easiest ones is turning unconscious competence into conscious incompetence. In other words, we make people aware where they're not good at things. Yeah, so work that colleagues of mine are doing with Brisbane Airport Corporation, who also have a relationship with QUT to have the Brisbane Airport Corporation chair of airport innovation. They do, on a quarterly basis, inspiration sessions, where we bring in scientists from very, very different fields to talk about their research, and then we think about how that actually translates to research. So we bring in people that talk about research on bananas, which on the surface doesn't sound like anything that has to do with airports or anything like this. But you get inspired and you learn things that you weren't even aware you didn't know. That creates consciousness. Creates consciousness in gaps, and creates consciousness in things that work well elsewhere that you might apply to you. Yeah? So we talk about what the internet has to do with cows. What loyalty has to do with drug addiction. And we bring to you a mindset that you wouldn't have in your regular conversation with your own organization or with other organizations in your sector. The second example is to turn unconscious competence into conscious competence. Now that's a bit more tricky. It means that there is competence in your organization, but you don't necessarily know that you have it. And I promised you I'd get back to this bakery example, because that's where we studied this. And the reason why we studied this was to explore a concept that we call positive deviance. A completely new way of thinking about how you manage your people and your teams. Normally, you would look at who in my team, who in my organization is working well, who's performing well, and who's performing not so well. When you find these bad eggs, you have a look and you try to manage these poor performers, right? Positive deviance is about the exact opposite. We don't care about the ones that are not doing so well. We care about the ones that are doing extremely well and what they're doing differently. How they are deviating from the rest, and in doing so, become very, very good. Now, normally we'd think about deviance in terms of, I'm stealing, I'm unethical, I'm a whistleblower, I'm, making other people look bad, and so forth. There's also people that break the rules, break the norms, deviance from what everybody else is doing, are incredibly successful with this. Very different way of thinking about management. So what we've done in our work with bakeries, we looked at the 1,000 bakeries that we see in Woolies stores here in the country and had a look at the ones that are performing better. That means that make better bread rolls, better baguettes, and sell more bread rolls to customers than everybody else in the country. And then look at what are they doing differently. And the one thing that you realize when you start studying this is that these people are incredibly competent in what they're doing without knowing this. The reason for that is that they lack this sort of reference point. They lack the comparison. They don't know how a bakery somewhere in Victoria operates. They don't know that they're in Weipa in northern Queensland and how their work might be different to what people do in Sydney. Right? So they are not conscious of their competence. However, if you actually explain to them, good day, good morning, you are one of the top bakers in this country, that actually brings a whole new level to their competencies, and they start reflecting about what it is that they're doing, and obviously, it swells the chest and makes them a bit prideful, and they'd like to share about this. What's the difference there? So why can we do this? Collaborating with science allows you to actually find this out because we can go in, find out what people are doing in bakeries because we have no idea. Very different. If Woolies starts to look at their own bakeries, they know exactly how their bakeries are meant to operate, what the people should be doing. We don't. So we only find out what they're doing and whether or not that's good or bad. Whether or not that is actually a violation of rules, we don't know. Right? So we have a principle of unbiased observation because of lack of knowledge. And that puts us in prime shoes to uncover things that people you wouldn't have expected and you wouldn't have looked for. Unfortunately, that also means that we had to get up at 2 a.m. in the morning to actually go to a bakery and bake bread, all for the interest of science, of course. What is the difference? What is the magnificent difference in thinking about innovations that occur somewhere in the organizations in this way? Now, normally you have a lot of people that sort of perform averagely, so you have a lot of bakeries that are more or less the same. You have some that perform poorly at the left end of the scale, and obviously you have some that do better than others. Normally what we would do, we would look at the bottom end and try to lift that a little bit, yeah? So we make the bad performers a little bit better and bring them sort of to the average. So we focus on improving the bottom 10%. This notion of positive deviance and turning that unconscious competence that's obviously out there into conscious competence and then rolling that out everybody else. It's completely the difference. We're not improving the top 10%, but we're bringing everybody else a bit closer to this top 10%. So instead of improving on 10% of people, we improve on 90% of people. Now to put that into figures, in a company the size of Woolworths, 4 bread rolls sold in a store equates $1 million. That's the scale of operations. So if I sell 4 more bread rolls across all the stores, what do you do? So I'll give you maybe some more tangible examples of what these positive deviance bakeries do. Number one, they don't care about their prescribed baking schedule. Woolworths used to operate a model where we come in at 2 a.m. in the morning, we start baking bread so that at 6 a.m. when the store opens or the bakery opens, there's fresh baguette and fresh bread and everything. Problem was, in a lot of these stores, especially in CBD situation like here in Sydney, we don't go in at 7 a.m. to buy our bread. We do this at lunchtime. We do this after work. And that's when we want the fresh bread. The smart bakers said, mind you, screw the schedule, we'll bake when it's opportune. So they bake throughout the day, thereby deviating from everybody else and being incredibly more successful because when people came in after work at 4:30, they had fresh bread. Yeah, simple principles that have an incredible, astounding effect on the overall performance. The whole notion is that in large organizations you have innovations happening anywhere, and it's just a matter of turning that into consciousness and rolling it out everybody else. So this notion, this type of research, is not bounded to Woolworths or bakeries, mind you. We're doing the same thing in our own universities. Where are innovations in teaching already happening that we could roll out to the 20,000 teaching staff that we have? Yeah, you could find the best researchers. We're working with franchise corporations and think about, well, where's the 7-Eleven Or where's your Subway that does so much better than everybody else, and what could that mean for everybody else in the whole franchise organization? That's the power of Deviance, and that's the power of actually thinking about how we manage our own teams quite differently. Now, I'm getting towards the end here, so instead of giving you a couple of conclusions here, why you should collaborate with science, I hope I gave you some examples. I wanted to ask you how you should do this. Not everybody wants to set up a chair, nobody has to set up a chair and work with universities on a 10-year window. There's multiple ways, and the most successful companies on this planet, not necessarily in Australia, are doing this in a variety of ways. Google, on the top left corner, they don't work with chairs, they don't go to universities, they bring the professors and the students into Google and work in the production departments, in their operations. So you can apply and spend your next half year working with Google and on their Google glasses or in their, I don't know, in their search, in Google Maps, etc., and inspire them and have innovative ideas while you're working on the job. Yeah? So we don't go to university, we bring the universities into Google. The work that we're doing with Woolworths is something more like a pipeline. We work together for multiple years, institutional arrangement, to actually access a pipeline of discoveries on certain topics of interest. That could be loyalties, it could be bakeries, it could be about mobile shopping, it could be about 3D printing and whether or not we need a supermarket after all. Grand challenges, Pfizer, Scripps Research Institutes, they're just another form that are very, very different, which is where lots of organizations pour a lot of money into research questions that I haven't even identified yet. Very different model. Not for everybody. Extended work spends, also quite interesting. In our own university, we have a so-called mathematics and industry study group, where every year, basically the mathematics department offers their brightest scientists and their brightest students to any organization out there that has an interesting mathematical problem. And they gauge their engagement whether or not they find that problem interesting to them. And if they are, they come and work and solve your problem for you for free, more or less. And finally, idea labs done by Nokia, HP, and so forth. They basically build laboratory, invite students in for free and say, you have some idea, come here. Trial them, experiment them. Give it a good old shot and see what happens. We don't care whether you fail, whether we hope that you succeed, but either or we'll give you a space to work out your innovation. So the question I want to put out here to this forum is, do we have any of these forums here in the room, in your organizations? Do you allow for innovation labs, for ideas to be tested? Do you allow for students and scientists to come in? Keep in mind that a lot of the things that drive us scientists is not money. We want to have interesting problems and interesting data. So if you can give me that, I'll be more than welcome and more than happy to work for you. All right. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Enjoy your day.